Good morning, everyone. The sitting is open. The next item on the agenda is Council and Commission statements, EU position on the proposed plan, and EU engagement towards a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Can I ask you to please take your seats, dear colleagues? I would also like to remind you that we continue with the test of the new format for this debate, and there will be no speakers list after the first round of speakers. On behalf of the groups, members who received speaking time from their political groups or non-attached secretariat will be called to speak and will be reminded of their allotted speaking time. Please keep an eye on the screens in the chamber where the current speaker and the next three speakers will be displayed, and when your name appears as upcoming speaker, I would like you to ask you to prepare and make your way to the lectern. The normal rules on blue cards and catch the eye procedure will apply during the debate. So first we start with the Council, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Marie Bjerre, on behalf of the Danish Presidency.
President, honourable members, President of the Commission, Commissioner, Russia launched its brutal, unjustified and unprovocated war of aggression against Ukraine nearly 4 years ago. Russia's war has had a terrible impact on Ukraine and its people. No one wants peace more than the Ukrainians. But while we speak, Russia continues its military attacks in Ukraine and has conducted hybrid attacks on our member states, including violations of several member states' airspace and sabotage of infrastructure. From day one, we have supported Ukraine's efforts to defend itself and seek peace. And we welcome all diplomatic efforts aimed at achieving just and lasting peace and security. We hope the recent US effort will lead to positive results, and we are pleased with the progress made at the meeting in Geneva. The Council has been clear. We stand united and firm in our support for Ukraine, for its sovereignty and its right to define its own future. Peace must be comprehensive, just and lasting. In view of the ongoing negotiations, I would like to recall the agreed principle for peace as stated by our leaders at the European Council. There can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine. There can be no negotiations that affect European security without Europe's involvement. Ukraine's and Europe's security are connected. Any agreement needs to be accompanied by robust and credible security guarantees that contribute to deterring future Russian aggression. Peace must respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Any truce or ceasefire need to be part of the process leading to a comprehensive peace agreement. Our joint approach is achieving peace through strength. This requires Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position, with Ukraine's own robust military and defense capability as an essential component. There cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave Ukraine open to future attacks. And we are clear on the principle that borders must not be changed by force. President, honourable members, President of the Commission, the EU's role is central to achieve peace in Ukraine. At this crucial time, we must speak with one voice, stay the course and continue our broad and unwavering support to Ukraine. EU foreign ministers are meeting virtually today to discuss the latest developments and to coordinate our actions for a sustainable peace for Ukraine and the European continent. One thing is clear: Only pressure on Russia and support to Ukraine will ensure that the Ukrainians can protect their security and freedom. Ukraine's security is Europe's security. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
President Metsola, President Pierre, honourable members. I want to start this debate not in Geneva, but in Ternopil, a city in western Ukraine, closer to the Polish border than it is to Kyiv. In the early hours of one morning last week, a storm of Russian drones and missiles rained down. The sheer force of the attacks leading to an inferno erupting. In the burning wreckage laid injured victims and more than 30 dead, innocent men, women, and children. Children like Amelka. Amelka, a 7-year-old girl from Poland who was in 2nd grade at the local school. Amelka died in her mother's arms, both of them killed in a mindless and callous act of brutality. On behalf of the Commission, and I'm sure all of us in this House today, I want to start by paying my respect and deepest condolences to all those mourning the victims of Ternopil and right across Ukraine. Over more than 3.5 years into this war of aggression, this is the daily reality on the ground. And it shows that we can never lose sight of what Ukraine is sacrificing, what Ukraine is fighting for: its security, its freedom, its independence. Because ultimately this is what is at stake in these crucial days for Ukraine and for Europe. Basically the core and the values of the UN Charter. And this is why Europe must keep up the pressure on Russia until there is a just and lasting peace. And I want to be clear from the very outset. Europe will stand with Ukraine and support Ukraine every step of the way. Honourable members, Russia's playbook has not changed. From the start, Russia has always believed that they can outlast Ukraine, Europe, and all of its allies. And it is why every time there is serious progress towards negotiations that can bring about a real peace, the violence escalates. We have seen this before. This is a pattern. And the noises from the Kremlin in the last few days say a lot about its real intentions. For them, Ukraine remains a first step in a much bigger game. For Russia, any peace deal is about permanently redrawing maps. It is about returning to great power relations and spheres of influence. But for Ukraine and for Europe, any peace agreement is about creating a just and lasting peace, peace that stops this conflict and does not sow the seeds for new future conflicts. And it is about ensuring a strong and sustainable security architecture for our continent, one that is underpinned by a strong Europe, a strong NATO, a strong transatlantic partnership, and that is what we will defend alongside Ukraine and our allies every step of the way. Honourable members, a just and lasting peace, this is what we all want. And this is why Europe supports all efforts to build that peace for Ukraine, a peace that stops the killing, one that avoids setting a dangerous precedent, one that guarantees Ukraine's security and its sovereign rights in the long term, and that ensures a robust security architecture for Europe. This is why we welcome the efforts led by President Trump. After months of discussions, it is important that the work on an actual text started. Of course, we know that much more effort is needed. But I believe, thanks to the work of Ukraine, the United States, and us Europeans over the last few days in Geneva, we now have a starting point. Our united front, our single voice, and our shared sense of purpose must continue to guide the work at European level. And I would like to outline some of the core principles for Europe as we work with Ukraine, the United States, and the coalition of the willing on the way forward. The first priority is that any agreement should deliver a just and lasting peace. And it should ensure real security for Ukraine and Europe. As a sovereign nation, there can be no limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attacks. And this is as much about deterrence as it is about Europe's security, because Ukraine's security is Europe's security, so Ukraine needs robust, long-term and credible security guarantees as part of a wider package to dissuade and deter any future attacks from Russia. And it is equally clear that any peace agreement needs to ensure that European security is guaranteed for the long term. The second priority, upholding Ukraine's sovereignty. We know that Russia's mindset has not changed since the days of Yalta, seeing our continent in terms of spheres of influence. So we need to be clear that there cannot be unilateral carving up of a sovereign European nation, and that borders cannot be changed by force. If today we legitimize and formalize the undermining of borders, we open the doors for more wars tomorrow, and we cannot let this happen. Sovereignty also means being able to choose your own future. Ukraine has chosen a European destiny that has already led to partial integration in our single market and our defense industrial base, and this is only the start of a journey. Europe's future is bound to Ukraine's future, and therefore Ukraine's future lies in the European Union. This is not only a matter of destiny, this is a core and essential part of any security guarantee framework, and we will do everything we can to deliver on it together. The third priority, securing Ukraine's financial needs. In the absence of any real intent of Russia to engage in peace talks, it is clear that we need to support Ukraine to defend itself. And that starts by ensuring that they have the necessary financial means. In the last European Council, we committed ourselves to cover the financial needs of Ukraine for the years 2026 and 2027. On this topic, we, the Commission, have presented an options paper. This includes an option on immobilized Russian assets. The next step is now that the Commission is ready to present a legal text. And honourable members, to be very clear, I cannot see any scenario in which the European taxpayers alone will pay the bill. This is also not acceptable. And another thing must also be clear, that any decision on this needs to be taken in line with the rules of the responsible jurisdiction and will respect European and international law. The fourth priority is, whatever the design of a future peace treaty, it is clear that much of the implementation will come down to the European Union and the NATO partners. Whether it's on security guarantees or on sanctions, financing of Ukraine's reconstruction, the integration in the single market, or EU membership, one principle has been accepted. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing about Europe without Europe, nothing about NATO without NATO. And the last priority I would like to focus on is one that cannot be forgotten, and that is the return of each and every Ukrainian child that has been abducted by Russia. There are tens of thousands of boys and girls whose fate is unknown, trapped in Russia by Russia. We will not forget them. There are thousands of mothers and fathers who have never stopped hoping, have never stopped fighting to bring back their children, and Europe will never give up in helping to make that happen. Honourable members, the days ahead are fraught with danger, first and foremost for the people of Ukraine, who continue to face the daily barrage of attacks. Yes, the situation is complex. Yes, the situation is volatile. Yes, the situation is dangerous. But I believe there's also an opportunity here to make real progress. So far, we have seen no signs from Russia of true willingness to end this conflict. So we have to keep up the pressure on Russia. But it is also our duty to engage with any and all efforts that can bring about a just and lasting peace. We know it will not be easy, but we have to find a way to move forward. We have to find a way to stop the killing, to help Ukraine rebuild and reconstruct, to return the children and reunite families. We have to find a way to provide lasting security for Ukraine and for our continent as a whole, and above all, honourable members, to forge a better future as a European future and for Ukraine. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commission President von der Leyen. And now, on behalf of the political groups, we start with the EPP, its chair, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, of the European Commission, and first of all, I want to thank you for changing your agenda and being today here with us. Commission President, Council, dear colleagues, 2,000 years ago, Tacitus said, "They make desert and call it peace." That is today Putin's concept. He failed to take Kiev years ago, and since then he has left death and destruction. Hundreds of children have been killed, more than 5 million refugees, war crimes in Bucha. Putin, dear colleagues, is a war criminal, and if a war criminal is not stopped, he will continue. The so-called peace plan was seen as a confirmation of Putin's plan, I have to say. And let me be clear, for us as EPP, this is unacceptable. No, a war criminal cannot be awarded for his terror. So giving up on Ukraine territory, on free Ukraine territory, is unacceptable. No, a war criminal cannot be awarded for this terror. So accepting any kind of amnesty for Russian war criminals is unacceptable. And no, a war criminal cannot be awarded for his terror. Allowing limits for independent Ukraine to choose their partners is unacceptable. And I want to thank our European leaders for their clear and firm reaction after a minute of thinking about it. I have to say, yes, everybody wants peace, but it must be just peace. Yes, everybody wants peace, but it must be sustainable peace. And yes, everybody wants peace, but not on the Russian conditions. The outcome of the Geneva talks look now much better. And I want to thank Ursula von der Leyen for representing the European voice on the table. I ask myself, what is Putin thinking in this moment of time? He's sitting in Kremlin and probably a little bit laughing on us. Why? Because the US-European X was over the last days in a quite chaotic situation. The European Union without a clear plan to finance Ukraine, and also the European Union without the US really seen as a reliable partner anymore. We are experiencing historic times. Things are fundamentally changing. And Trump made also clear in these last days that the US will not anymore guarantee lasting peace in Europe under all conditions. He's seen himself more as a moderator and not as a person who is clearly positioning himself. We as Europeans are alone in a very, very cold world. And having all this in mind, I ask myself, which Europe do we really need? Which Europe would be capable to answer this weekend's challenges? For example, who speaks on behalf of Europe? I saw that the G3 was meeting. Germany, France, Great Britain. I respect all of these nations. But I have to say, that's not my Europe when they speak. That's not my Europe. Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, nominated by all leaders, by all nations, and also had a clear mandate in this European chamber, freely elected European Parliament, is for me the Speaker of this European Union. And that's why we have to strengthen her role to have a real European voice there. The second question, how can Europe finance the issues on the table? We have currently, to be honest, no clear idea how to finance the needs of Ukraine. 140 billion euros for the next upcoming 2 years. Frozen assets, additional debt. We are not really ready. And we have no real clear answer in this moment of time. So stop complaining about the US and delivering. We need sufficient MFF and financial resources for defending our European interests. And we have a third question on the table. Can we defend ourselves? With the new NATO targets, Europe will spend 900 billion euros a year to defend itself if we achieve the NATO targets. The same amount of money as the US is spending. And our citizens rightly expect the same level of security on the long run. And that's why it's now the moment to really go for European defense pillar. Drones war, satellite surveillance, missile defense system, cyber brigade. Dear colleagues, we need to work towards a united European army on the long run. Years of war teach us we can't guarantee peace if we do not show we are not ready to prepare our defense capabilities. And that is not a dream. That was already a starting point decades ago when Adenauer, de Gasperi, Schuman worked on this. With the idea after the Second World War, no war in Europe again. And dear colleagues, nothing is more actual than this message. No war in Europe, only if we prepare ourselves. So strengthening European national armies is a good thing, but not enough. Europe needs real determination. The determination that reunited Europe just 7 years after the Second World War, the determination that made the euro the second strongest currency in the world, and the determination that Ukrainian friends show every day when they tell Putin, we will not take our European way of life away from us. That's why we have to stand on the side of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I give the floor to the S&D Group and its chair, Irache Garcia Perez.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, well, right now, I think we should and must indeed speak openly and clearly in this debate, because the badly titled peace plan of Trump and Putin is no such thing. It's a plan for capitulation which betrays our values, a document cooked up on the back of Ukraine and the European Union, which tramples underfoot sovereignty, independence, and the territorial integrity of a country. It recognizes the right of conquest, it consecrates the law of force, and it converts multilateralism into an empty trinket. And it does that with some obscene coldness to satiate Putin's imperialist fears and to line Trump's pockets. Because let's be clear, it's unacceptable to force Ukraine to give up Donbass and the Crimea.
amputating its own territory as if it were a currency for exchange. It's unacceptable to limit its army to 600,000 soldiers, leaving it without defences in the face of the aggressor. And it's unacceptable to ban it from joining NATO. That would be a permanent vulnerability. And it's deeply unacceptable that Trump lays claim to the Russian assets frozen at the expense of the European Union. Mrs. von der Leyen, we cannot fall into the trap of history. In the 20th century, we learnt that appeasing a dictator comes with a devastating price. We learnt that whoever despises democracy only understands the language of truth, of force. Today, Putin is the living proof of this lesson. We know that he'll only sit down at the negotiating table when he faces difficulties in the battlefield. And we know that allowing Ukraine to fall will be opening the door to new aggression, expansionism, which will never end. We also knew that Trump would abandon Ukraine. He hinted at it, he announced it, and now he's doing it. And that's why the European Union has to stand firm. For 2 years, we have been calling to be able to use the frozen Russian assets in order to finance a reparations loan to allow Ukraine to reconstruct and strengthen its defence. 2 years waiting for the Commission, 2 years for the Council, 2 years of inaction which allowed Trump to come across as owning those resources, which can only belong to the aggressor, the Ukrainian people. And I hope that, Mrs. von der Leyen, you can accept that this is unacceptable. That's why we need a clear proposal. And it's also the time to say another uncomfortable truth. How can a country actually exercise its legitimate defence if we don't allow it to respond to the attacks destroying its schools, hospitals, housing and power plants? We give them weapons, but we are not allowing them to use them from where Putin is launching his missiles and drones. It's a contradiction. We have to end that right now. And our response, therefore, has to be to strengthen sanctions, including bans on importing Russian oil in January and gas by the end of 2026. And the end of this story must not be that Trump absolved Putin. It must end with Putin sitting before the International Criminal Tribunal. Mrs. von der Leyen, you will have our support in this. Our union cannot repeat the mistake of appeasement. We have today to stand not only up to the criminal Putin, but also up to the geopolitical frivolity of Trump. And we have to do that with our heads held high, defending a simple, clear truth that a peace without justice is no peace, and that a courageous Europe is not written with fear, but rather with principles, solidarity, and the deep-lying conviction that Ukraine will win, because the European Union will never abandon it. Thank you.
Now, on behalf of the PFE Group, Kinga Gál.
Elnök asszonyok, képviselőtársaim!
Madam President, Presidents, colleagues, now we have a unique chance for peace. If we miss it, we may not get it back for a while. So it is our common responsibility not to let this chance of peace go. Because what would be the alternative? Further long days in Ukraine with senseless destruction and shedding of blood. We know that this war can't be won on the ground, only at the negotiating table. So, based on the realities, we must make the best possible of the situation. The need for a rapid end to the war after the start of negotiations can't be mistaken. The title of the debate was changed. The word peace was deleted from the title of the debate, as if one were afraid of a peace plan. We're sitting here today because the founding fathers of the European Union, they didn't want to see mass graves of soldiers in Europe. As a guarantee for this, they created the European Union as a framework for peace and security. We are duty-bound to preserve this because peace isn't just a political backdrop. Peace is a value in itself. People want peace. Europe has paid a huge price for this war already. Huge amounts of European taxpayers' money are going into weapons supplies and repairing the damage of the war. And now it emerges that much of this money has been lost to corruption at the highest level, and this Parliament isn't prepared to talk about that. The Commission President is calling for even more money from the Member States. The standing stance of the Patriots is clear. We condemn Russia's aggression, but in the name of the victims in Ukraine, we must call an end to this and start reconstruction in Ukraine. So the Union must support this American peace plan and not hold it up. We should not miss this chance for peace now, this chance for peace and security.
I give the floor to Adam Bielan.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, appreciating commitment of President Trump for peace, it is impossible not to question the results of all the engagements of European leaders. What was achieved within the last year to bring armistice about? Why is European diplomacy acting like a reviewer who only responds to the announcement of American peace proposals? Why does not Brussels formulate some propositions first? Why does it not submit constructive solutions and valid negotiating arguments to the Americans? And the wartime balance of flows between financial resources between EU, Ukraine and Russia presented by the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs recently. Well, 187 billion euros support was made available to Ukraine, but the value of imports from Russia was to the tune of 311 billion euros, including crude oil and gas. Negative balance of support to Ukraine is to the tune of 220 billion zlotys. So the European Union is far away from bringing peace about, and many countries are still not detached from Russian interests and Russian resources, and the European countries torpedo the propositions of tapping Kremlin's resources, whereas the Americans want to make use of them. I'm also sorry to see the marginalization of Poland ongoing recently, the country that came up with the most massive support to Ukraine at the outset of the war. If Polish government is not represented at the negotiation table in Geneva, if a Polish Prime Minister travels separately to Kyiv, well, we are not duly represented. Let us not expect that Russia will somehow react if we still have the ongoing financing of wartime economy.
Ayer, President of Renew Europe.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Minister. So here we are in the chamber, and yet if Zelensky hadn't been so courageous, the front line would have been much closer to France than it is at the moment. We shouldn't flinch in adopting sanctions against the Putin regime. We need to expect of Europe and its leaders that they apply themselves diplomatically and appropriately. I don't think I can make it clearer than that. We cannot have peace in Ukraine without Ukrainians and without Europeans around that table for negotiating. Now, for several days, people have been talking about a peace plan, a pseudo-peace plan. To be frank, we can ask what the real intentions are behind the Americans' moves. because there's a whole raft of concessions from Ukraine. But what are we asking of Russia? What is the Trump administration asking of Putin's Russia? Ladies and gentlemen, this plan is betrayal. We need to understand we shouldn't fall into this game. And it's good that we've realised that, but we need to be much firmer, much more united in our demands. Success in negotiations will depend on demanding the right things to achieve a just and lasting peace, robust security guarantees, not restricting Ukrainian army, having a coalition of the willing helping out in guaranteeing that peace, and using frozen assets to fund this. So, Madam President, Minister, when are you going to make sure that this is deblocked in Council? We've got a solution on the table. There is an imperative to provide the necessary guarantees to get rid of the blocks in Council. That's what's at stake at the coming summit, and it's extremely important. This peace, ladies and gentlemen, this peace has to guarantee the freedom of Ukraine and the freedom of the allies it chooses. It shouldn't undermine its possible futures in Europe or NATO. And for this peace to be just and lasting, we refuse the admonishment of those who are war criminals. And we can't allow this to go through the United Nations and just left to one side. The Bucha genocide, the attacks, and the support from some people here in this chamber as well to maintain that Ukraine was the aggressor. Ladies and gentlemen, this war in Ukraine is the moment of truth for Europe. We are alone in facing our fate, and it's imperative that we make progress on Europe's defence. That's a sine qua non for our independence, but we have to understand who we are, we, the European Union, because we're more than just a market, more than just 450 million consumers. We are a political power. We are a power and underpinned by democratic principles that many places in the world are fighting for. And we need to set out our ambitions so that we can defend our principles and our values. Thank you.
Now the co-president of the Greens Group, Terry Reintke.
Thank you, President, dear Minister, dear colleagues. I know you cannot say this here, but I believe it has to be said. What was published last week, whether it was now a plan or a concept or whatever else, that was a disgrace. And not only in the making of it, without Europe and without Ukraine at the table, but also in the content. Because what was written in this plan was a de facto capitulation plan for Ukraine. And this, colleagues, would not mean more peace in Europe. It would mean a more insecure Europe and eventually more war in Europe. While at the same time, Putin is bombing civilians and has so far declined every single path for peace. But I get that we cannot dwell in the past and that we have to look ahead now. So first, for me, it took too long for Europe to be there, but it is good that right now we are sitting at the table and that we are speaking with a strong and with a united voice. And I can only support, it should be you, Madame von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, who are speaking for Europe there. And second, yes, we are the strongest allies of Ukraine. That has become very clear over the past week. But we are not just sitting there for Ukraine and in solidarity with Ukraine. We are sitting there because this is about Europe's future. It's about Europe's security. So it is also the battle for our freedom and for our democracy that is being fought there. And lastly, moving ahead on the frozen assets issue will be even more important now. Putin should pay for this war, not European taxpayers. And no matter what happens, colleagues, let's make Ukraine an EU member as soon as possible. This will make them and us much more safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the co-president of the Left Group, Martin Schildewan.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you, Madam President, Ms von der Leyen, ladies and gentlemen. Listening to this debate, you get the impression that international politics is based on expressing desiderata rather than the balance of power the level of refusal to accept reality is staggering. For almost 4 years, the Russian war of aggression has been raging against Ukraine. Yes, Putin bears responsibility for this war. Yes, at any time he could end it. And yet, never since the start of the war have we been closer to a ceasefire than now. Now, as a realist, I can tell you I'm not happy about who wrote this plan. And certainly this plan doesn't set out a route to a just and lasting peace either. But at this juncture, it is our best chance to bring the war to an end. And you have to bear the responsibility to do everything in your powers to achieve that objective without, in doing so, selling Ukraine and the EU down the river to the USA and Russia. Now, first and foremost, we owe this peace to the Ukrainian people whose suffering and privations have to come to an end. You mentioned the civilian victims who had to die. This has to be brought to an end so that hope and joy can shape the lives of people in Ukraine. But I want this peace in place as well so that the burden of war can be lifted from the shoulders of our population as well. Because here there are also many people who are extremely concerned as to whether the war may escalate further and indeed how much more will be required of our societies financially. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is that war is raging on European soil and the EU hasn't undertaken any diplomatic endeavours worthy of the name or even provided support at least to try and end it. Instead, here in this chamber we've heard again and again mention made of the fact that the war has to be won on the battlefield. Well, at least that's a reality that you're starting to change. Slowly you're starting to realise that the route to a lasting peace is not an unending war, but you're using war at the same time in Ukraine to unleash a massive arms program in the EU to the detriment of social cohesion, public services and the protection of the climate. And at the end of the day, who's going to foot the bill? The workers and families. Your political refusal to accept reality, ladies and gentlemen, your political idleness, Ms von der Leyen, has meant that the European politics has only asked to act once everything's already been decided. Under you, Ms von der Leyen, the EU has become a geostrategic plaything for the interests of the USA and Donald Trump. And part and parcel of the truth is that both Trump and Putin are once again carving up European countries and resources amongst themselves, pushing the EU into a position of being a bystander. They're looking at the spheres of influence and the reciprocal economic relations, and you are just watching idly by, Ms von der Leyen. We have to at least underscore the part in the plan that talks about the Russians paying for the reconstruction of Ukraine, but we need to see debt relief for Ukraine as well. We need to have security guarantees for both sides incorporated into an international security architecture so that peace can endure. We have to have both parties around the table on an equal footing. To endeavour to achieve this is something that you should have accepted from the start. I hope you can learn, but I still have my doubts.
Now, on behalf of the ESN Group, Alexander Sell.
Donald Trump hat einen Friedensplan für die
Donald Trump has come up with a peace plan for Ukraine, and Ms. von der Leyen wasn't asked even why. You were not involved in the talks because you're not ready to talk. You haven't sent anybody to Moscow, and you're proud of that. When a year ago Viktor Orban went to Moscow, you shouted about that here, but it's clear that in order to establish a peace agreement, you have to talk with both the parties involved. That's what the Americans are doing now. Instead of that, you have used the taxpayers' money, 190 billion euros from the EU. Experts say that up to 30% has gone somewhere else. 50 billion for golden toilets in Ukraine somewhere. So you were the defense minister for 6 years in Germany, but so far what's happened, there have been workshops. What is actually happening? People aren't taking you seriously anymore, but I'm happy that the Americans want to end the war. Too many Ukrainians and Russians have been maimed or killed. Too much money has gone to Kyiv to finance a pointless war and to line the pockets of a corrupt regime.
2 minutes. Go ahead. Please, move.
Madam President, colleagues, my goodness, is that really America? That was my first reaction to the first Trump plan. And there were reactions from Europe about negotiations of various types. But Putin's attitude is the same. He still has his maximalist position. Whatever comes along, first of all, he says that we have to clear up the details. That means that he doesn't want a ceasefire or negotiations because he thinks that he's on the road to victory. President Trump, regrettably, tends to want to end the war quickly, but by favouring what he thinks to be the stronger party. I wonder what his real motives are. We have shown solidarity for Ukraine from the very start. As a parliament, we expect from our executive that they do more than just correcting American plans. We must find ways to really bring Putin to the negotiating table, and we can only do that with more pressure. Otherwise, he will try to impress Trump to get what he wants. I expect that the decision makers in the UK get going and unblock the frozen Russian assets as a loan for Ukraine. I think that we should find lasting ways, and we can make sure that we check the working conditions of the ships going through the Öresund. The flag states, which isn't Russia, aren't signatories of the relevant treaties, and they fall under Danish rules. We must make sure that we have an end of the war and that we have credible security guarantees with or without the US in line with Article 5 of the NATO Treaty or the EU treaties. I think we must take the measures in the military areas that will force Putin to the negotiating table. That means long-range missiles, which enables Ukraine to eliminate production sites and important infrastructure. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Roten, you have the floor.
President, Commission, Council, dear colleagues, Vladimir Putin has a long history of breaking agreements and using fake negotiations to delay and divide. Ukraine and Europe want peace, a fair and sustainable peace, not a peace that rewards the aggressor, delivers impunity, undermines European security, ignores past violations and emboldens future aggression. Unless one side is losing or a powerful third party steps in, peacemaking is a slow and delicate process. It requires either strength or patient, skilled diplomacy. And today, both are missing on both sides of the Atlantic. So there is no room for quick and dirty fixes, indecision and risk avoidance. Peace is neither a real estate deal or another round of council statements. Russia is not winning its war of aggression. There's no reason for Ukraine to capitulate, but the cost for Ukrainians remains deep and painful. So I implore the Council, break the cycle we have witnessed again and again. I implore you to finally start making Europe a relevant force for peace. We had no choice, again, but to react, somewhat panicked flurry, to a deeply flawed plan with Moscow's fingerprints all over it, to protect Ukraine and Europe and our ability to decide our future. And you talk about actions and pressure, but you missed, as member states, a chance last month on the loan. The pressure would have been on already. What we really need now is urgent, proactive approach. Action, dear Council and Commission. Do not wait for Putin to prove once again he is not interested in peace before we increase the pressure. Do it now. Do it together. The reparations loan is critical, as are deep strike and air defense capabilities. Nobody here wants a debate in which we again will say more or less the same in a couple of weeks or months while nothing fundamentally changed. Take action. Take the lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Wilinski, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, on the global stage of heads of state and government, there are two people I can see being very convincing in favour of peace, the American President Donald Trump and the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. By the way, both of these people are people who you confront with a lack of respect and enmity and have done for years. Secondly, you want a seat at the negotiating table. Well, it would be all well and good if Europe could have developed its actions to be able to be in that position. However, it is neither in a position to offer social stability or economic prosperity for its own continent. You were the ones who pushed people in the arms of the US. And you were like a bunch of school kids when you did meet Donald Trump. And then you get the only person on our side, Viktor Orban, who's actually do anything. And they are the ones who have the gravitas and clout to get things done. So this chamber's not even in a position to make sure that your policies are applied and push for peace. You're not in that position because you're riven. We have 350,000 people who've died, almost 2 million injured. And I'd say the left group was actually right today, regardless who is responsible. Today, it's about stopping the massacre. The people who are trying to exploit the situation should not be allowed to win the day.
Mr. Zelensky, you have a blue card from Mr. Kanev from the EPP group. Do you accept it? Thank you very much. My next speaker is Mr. Ponax. You have the floor, please.
Good morning, dear colleagues, Madam Commissioner. We are at the crossroads right now, and the way how we cross it will determine what kind of world we and our children will live in. In a world of business where everything is determined by physical force and convenience, in which the aggressor is rewarded and criminals are granted amnesty, or in a world of laws in which borders cannot be changed by force, in which the aggressor pays for the damage caused and war criminals are persecuted. And it is not just about Ukraine or Europe. It will become a handbook for all aggressive regimes in the world. Another important fact, Russia has already enjoyed impunity for all the crimes it committed, both during the Second World War and especially afterwards, against all the occupied countries and nations, for deportations, gulags and other crimes. If it succeeds for the second time, sooner or later, the third time will follow. Thank you.
Who is from? Dear colleague, you have a blue card. Sorry. You have a blue card from Mrs. Grappini. Do you accept it? Thank you. Mr. Austravicius, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Minister, Commissioner, dear colleagues, the Russian leadership aims to destroy and subjugate Ukraine, removing it from the political map of Europe. The Kremlin is pursuing these aims through military aggression and by imposing preconditions in various negotiations. No other alternatives are seen from Moscow. We must understand that Russia's aggressive intentions also affect European security architecture, seeking to create grey security zones which are unacceptable and definitely dangerous. A peace agreement must not only end the war against Ukraine, but also put the end to Russia's hybrid war against EU countries and their partners. This undeclared hybrid war must end with Russia making clear commitment and accepting accountability for its actions. Justice demands that all Russian and allied leaders and officials who initiated and enabled the war against Ukraine and its people be held accountable. This must serve as a lesson for the future. The war in Ukraine has affected the whole of Europe. We have all experienced the hardships of war, and we continue to witness Russia's ongoing war crimes against humanity every day. While the financial, humanitarian and military aid provided is crucial, I really regret that the European Union has missed the opportunity to demonstrate its role as a global player by not forcing Russia, the aggressor state, to sit down at the negotiations table. History is not yet over. Let us strengthen Europe's and Ukraine's security, because Europe will never be safe without a defended and victorious Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Sondheim, you have the floor.
Putin has dictated, and Putin has come up with a peace plan. It isn't a plan for peace. It's a plan for giving up. Ukraine will give up territory, cut its army, and not give up NATO. What will they get in return? No proper responsibility for those who started the war, no reparations, no agreement for the kidnapped children. It's completely unacceptable. That's why it's so important that the EU stands firm in our support for Ukraine, but also act earlier. That means security guarantees worth a name. That means that Ukraine itself decides its defense and its alliances. It means Ukrainian territorial integrity. That's peace. Anything else is giving in. That would lead to more war in Europe. And we have tried that before. Thank you.
I have a blue card from Madame Grappini. Yes, Madame Grappini, you have the floor. Seat 542.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I will speak Romanian. I hope our colleague can listen. I agree with what you said regarding the aggression and the tragedy occurring in Ukraine. One of our colleagues said that the EU reacted swiftly. Do you believe that? Do you believe that the EU reacted quickly in this diplomatic game? Do you believe that now the European Commission has a strategic plan because European citizens feel abandoned? What can the Commission do and that it hasn't done yet for peace and to end this odious war? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. No, I think it would be a false blame to say that the EU has reacted very swiftly and very quickly in this. And I think a lot of us want Europe to play a more decisive role in this world. So do we. And that means to take a leading role also in making alliances in this world. I do believe that we still are a big majority who want a world of order and rules, and not a world where the big powers, Russia, US, China, are deciding without any international bodies. So no, we wish more action from EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sondheim. My next speaker is Madame de Mirel.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, the war in Ukraine must finally come to an end. Every serious diplomatic initiative counts, and we mustn't lose them. The old reflex of refusing diplomatic initiatives, exit strategies, was wrong. Now, this is a real opportunity for a ceasefire and to achieve better conditions for the Ukrainians back then. But some people, particularly the UK, encouraged Ukraine to continue to fight. Ms. von der Leyen played along with them. And now, today, we've seen that 10,000 people have died and there have been huge territorial losses for Ukraine as well. Well, congratulations to everyone there who were encouraging people to go along with this. And your solidarity is what the Ukraine is paying for now. Every negotiation involves harsh concessions as well, particularly loss of territory for Ukraine. But there is no alternative to a political solution. So what is your alternative if you want to drag this war on even further? The people in Ukraine need peace. So does Europe and the world. So now we need initiatives from the EU.
Blue card from Mr. Tinkinen from the ECR group. Do you accept it? Do you accept it? Mr. Tinkinen, you have the floor. 30 seconds.
President, colleague, you said that the UK has supported Ukraine continuing to fight and defend itself. you said that based on this, Ukraine has lost territory. I just have one question for you. If Ukraine had stopped defending itself when Russia originally attacked Ukraine, just imagine how much territory Ukraine would have lost, or the entire country.
Lieber Kollege, danke für. Thank you for that question, colleague. The fact is that at the beginning of the war and Russia's attack on Ukraine, Ukraine did resist. And the Putin regime had to see that the initial strategy of bringing about regime change in Ukraine wasn't going to work. So the Putin regime declared that it would withdraw on the pre-war conditions. And then we had these negotiations in Istanbul, but the whole world community said that both administrations, the Johnson administration, they had no interest in this peace. That strategy.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Your time is over. Thank you very much, dear colleague. Your time is over. Okay. My next speaker is Mr. Aust. You have the floor.
Finally, a glimmer of hope. Mr. Rubio, the Foreign Minister of the US, is talking about considerable advances having been made in the peace discussions in Geneva and is looking forward to an agreement soon. It's a historic juncture, and we need to support this credible peace prospect rather than undermining it. You can't just express your wishes and get them. Sometimes you have to forge painful compromises, but it's the first step towards establishing peace. It's not the end of the peace process. We are often at the start of a peace process where we need reconciliation. Peace brings an end to suffering, but also brings to an end the very expensive arms races that start up. Then we can use the money where it's really needed in future-based technologies, modern infrastructure, education, in foster families and affordable housing. So we have to grasp this chance for peace.
Our colleague, Mr. De Massi, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the attack by Russia on Ukraine was illegal. It's terrible, but this war was avoidable and it could have been ended earlier. For example, in March 2022 in Istanbul, and not Ukraine is not being betrayed by those who say we need a rapid ceasefire, the killing must end. Ukraine is being betrayed by those who are saying that Ukraine's position can be improved on the battlefield, that hundreds of thousands of men will continue to die. Soldiers are dying whilst the oligarchs are building golden toilets. Zelensky said there are people in the West who don't mind a long war, even if this means the end of Ukraine. That's where we are now, colleagues, and it's time for Europe not to torpedo a peace. A long war of attrition is a betrayal of the people in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. El señor Pascual de la Parte tiene la palabra.
Mr. Pascual de la Parte now has the floor.
To engage in a lasting and fair peace. What does it mean? That means to understand why Putin marched into Ukraine. He didn't march into Ukraine in order to occupy the Donbass. He only had the control of this through the terrorists and the militias. He marched into Ukraine in February 22 in order to topple the regime and to put a puppet president in Ukraine. This is the objective of Putin. That no matter what kind of concessions, list of land concessions to Putin, he will not change his calculation. He will continue the war the day after the agreement through hybrid threats and through massive information activities. Then the only way for us to change Putin's calculation is to show that he cannot win this war, supporting massively to our Ukrainian friends and to increasing our pressure upon Putin. How? Through sanctions. Through sanctions with secondary sanctions, with those who engage with Russia, in order to make clear that he cannot go along with that. By the way, it would be very useful if the European Union put all these priorities that the President of the Commission has put forward here, to cobble them together and to put forward as a peace plan, a European peace plan with a hand in hand with our Ukrainian friends, which offer a kind of guarantee, security guarantees, which offer a political horizon, which offer financial support so that Ukraine can win this war and Putin change his calculation. Otherwise, we will have this pending on our heads for years to come. Thank you very much.
Señor Pascual de la Parte, ¿tiene usted una tarjeta?
Mr. Pascual de la Parte, you have a blue card from Mr. Rivera from the left. Do you accept it?
Obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Senhor...
Thank you, President. Mr. Pascual de la Parte, officially, Trump's plans for Ukraine haven't been revealed, but what we are aware of are the statements in plenary by the Commission President and members from the majority who support the Commission to carry on this war game and sabotaging the Ukraine peace plan. Do you really think that this is a solution to bring about peace and diplomatic solution to the war? That's why I put that question to you. When should the European Union give up this position of carrying on the war and try and bring about a long-term peace?
Thank you very much for the questions, very pertinent. The European Union has to make sure that we have a lasting and fair peace, not peace at any price. Peace at any price is not peace at all. It is injustice with the Ukrainian people. And in order to do that, we have to continue supporting our Ukraine, because it is not the stability and the peace in Ukraine which is at stake here. It's our, yours, mine stability and our peace. Should this war in Ukraine not come with a fair outcome, the whole European project will be put at stake. The whole European and NATO project will be put at stake. If there is a lot. That's why we cannot give in to any kind of peace plan which doesn't incorporate a fair conditions for the Ukrainian people. And to change Putin's calculation means that he has to assume that he cannot win this war. As simple as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, señor Pascual de la Parte.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we all want to achieve a peace agreement for Ukraine, but a just and lasting peace which respects international law, respects borders, and involves Ukraine and Europe. President Trump's 28-point plan can in no way represent the basis for negotiations. It's not going to bring peace. It's not going to bring stability. On the contrary, it's going to increase the appetite of Russia and other powers as well. And it's shameful that for the Commission to see what's been happening today, and it gave the green light to the US, but it's now calling for a seat at the table. Europe has to take initiatives for a just peace. It must have a strong voice and decide itself on its safety, not allowing other people to decide for us without us. The European population will condemn us if we continue as we've been doing to now. Thank you.
Mr. Dutch, you have the floor.
Az elmúlt években az Európai Unió már 190.
Thank you. In past years, the EU has spent 192 billion euros to finance this war. And Brussels has decided that for the years 2026 and 2027, they're going to carry on with a further 32 billion euros that will be spent on Ukraine. Ms. von der Leyen has also promised to find a further 135 billion euros for Ukraine. And what do you expect of the European governments? Well, as of 2028, you want to spend a further 366 billion euros on Ukraine. And this basically is financing the war. And this shows that the European taxpayers are the ones whose money is flowing into the golden toilets. We need peace.
Card from Mr. Saramu from the left. Do you accept it?
Thank you, Chair. I will ask in Finnish.
Do you know how much the Chechen war cost? How much the Russian operations in Georgia and Moldova have cost? How much the Baltic countries pay for hybrid attacks by Russia on their infrastructure? How will we pay if Russia isn't stopped? Putin has shown, and Trump have shown, that they do not respect international law. Where will this end? Do you have a view on that?
Kedves képviselő úr,
Well, sir, the European Union is paying over 7 billion euros for this war. Everybody is claiming that this is necessary for the peace to prevail in Europe. If you just took a fraction of this massive sum of money and spent it in Europe instead, then that would have been a much better approach. This is a waste of taxpayers' money.
Next speaker is Mr. Giadi.
Κυρία Φοντερ Λάιεν,
Ms. von der Leyen, strange as it may seem, I would agree with the statement you made 3 days ago and again today in the wake of the proposed peace plan. In other words, that Ukraine's borders cannot be changed by the use of force. I agree, and I'd even take it further. But just 1 day earlier, you described Turkey as an important partner for the European Union, a country, in other words, that is illegally occupying European territory and is attempting to change borders through the use of force and through committing war crimes. That member state of the European Union that you always conveniently forget to mention in your speeches, Cyprus. Madam President, Europe cannot be selective. No invader can ever be considered a partner, be it Russia, be it Turkey. So let's give up on hypocrisy. Let's fight together for freedom, because no legitimization of illegal fait accompli can ever be accepted, whether we're talking Ukraine or Cyprus.
Mrs. Keller from Renew, do you accept it? Madam Keller.
Ana Vasconcelos, sorry, in another seat. How do you...
Sorry, it's to Mrs. Keller, to the one that I'm giving the floor.
I'm in another seat, sorry. I'm Ana Vasconcelos. I requested the blue card. Can I take it?
But are you sit in Mrs. Keller's seat?
I am,
Are you sitting?
yes.
Okay, it was for you. The confusion it was because you were sitting in her seat.
Okay.
Madame Vasconcelos, you have the floor.
How can we truly keep our nation safe and protect us from the desires of our enemy, Putin, if we give in to his demands? Is it not the lesson from 2014 that Europe's weak response to the annexation of Crimea led to the encouragement of Putin invading Ukraine? Is it not the lesson from the Second World War that when we stand up and show that we will not capitulate, that we in the end are safer and can safeguard our way of living? Is that also not the lesson from the Cold War? How are you claiming to protect our nations, keep us safe, keep us strong, if you give in to these demands?
Thank you very much, Madame Vasconcelos. Mr. Yedi.
Well, I am glad you agree with what I've said, that I'll repeat this once again. I was saying I'm delighted that you agree with what I said, that no invading state can be accepted and be seen as a partner and ally of the European Union, whether we're talking about Russia or Ukraine, because we have a duty as a European Parliament, indeed as a European Union, to protect international law in Ukraine and in Cyprus. Freedom for Ukraine and for Cyprus. Thank you.
In the end, you have the floor.
President, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about a peace plan. From the very start, it was a Russian diktat. It's more. It's a hybrid attack on us all, because Russia economically has huge problems, and militarily it hasn't had the success that they thought they would after 4 years. And the 19-point plan, I don't know it. I don't know if anybody knows it. I've only heard that Putin has already rejected it. In the US, the chaos is perfect. Mr. Rubio is talking to Europe, Vance with Russia. Witkoff gives tips about for months. They're telling the Russians how to deal with Putin. And now Europe is coming in because we should see things through the lens of Russia. We must see the role of Ukraine. They're the victims, and I don't like the fact that perpetrators and victims are being mixed up. Russia is the aggressor, and you can't discuss that. You can't wish it away. Europe must act, first of all, diplomatically. We need to have our own proposals and not just reacting. Secondly, economically, the 140 billions must immediately be made available for Ukraine. And yes, and also militarily. I'm happy that Irachi in the Socialists in Spain has said we must remain active militarily. The objectives, Ukraine must neutralize the targets from which daily missiles and drones are being found, and the majority of those are affecting the civilian population, and we can't accept that.
Have the floor.
Colleagues, what happened last week is Putin's rescue plan. Russia is a monster on a clay feet, like the collapsed USSR, and Putin desperately needs Washington's hand. Ukraine needs peace more than anything else. Russia wants to continue its aggressive policy. The only way to just and long-lasting peace is to help Ukraine to win and not be afraid to punish the aggressor. There will be no good, long-lasting deal with Putin, just as there was no good deal with Hitler. And what is our role, the EU's? It is essential. Today we need an European plan not only for Ukraine's European future, but also for Russia. We need a plan for not Putin's rescue, which some in Washington are doing, but a plan for Russia to become a normal state. You say unrealistic. Let Putin lose in Ukraine, then we'll see. The most important strategic provision of the European plan is that Ukraine will become a member of the EU as soon as possible. We must already integrate Ukraine into all EU defense projects being developed. Today, Ukraine is no less important for our own security than the United States has been for us until now. We are on the right track, but the fruits of the strategic defense decisions we make now will come later, and the most dangerous period is now. There is a long and difficult road ahead. Let's not be afraid to speak openly to our people. We have no other choice. We have to take great responsibility for Europe's security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Madame Van Bremt, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen. If you look at Trump's peace plan, or if you listen to the far right or the far left, then it's almost as if there's a problem that needs to be resolved between two warring countries, but nothing is closer to the truth. That's fake news. It's a fake narrative. This war was started illegally by Putin, the aggressor, and that has to be the point of departure of any peace negotiations. It's obvious that there has to be a ceasefire to start with. We have to have a lasting peace based on international law. But it is also important, and I'm very pleased that also von der Leyen pointed this out, that we look at the human suffering that has gone on. More than 17,000 children have been kidnapped during the course of this war from Ukraine to Russia. Any peace agreement has to make sure that all of those children, right down to the last one, can go home to their homes in Ukraine. And finally, this war and the ceasefire and reconstruction needs to be paid by Russia. We need to make sure that we find a solution within Council for using frozen assets as soon as possible. Thank you.
Dear colleague, Mr. Nimisto, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Ukraine needs Europe now more than ever. We must deliver. Last week, one thing became obviously clear. A US government that is not ready to protect democratic values within its own country cannot be trusted to protect these values abroad. It is a task we must bear in Europe. Ukraine needs a Europe that is united in its support, and Russian authoritarian imperialism and its war policy cannot be allowed to succeed. A capitulation or a forced peace on their terms would only increase the risk to democracy and of future wars in Europe, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us. Europe must increase its military and diplomatic support to Ukraine. The decision on the €140 billion reparations loan to Ukraine, with the backing of Russia's frozen assets, must be made in the coming weeks. Banning also the imports of Russian gas and other fossil fuels permanently must be finalized in the trilogues for the REPowerEU proposal next week. Sanctions must also be strengthened. Russia and its economy is reeling, so we must continue to push for support for Ukraine in order to achieve a just and lasting peace. And that peace means justice. Justice also for the kidnapped children. It means sovereignty for Ukraine. It means respect for international law, and it means also that you must pay for war crimes that you have done. Never reward aggression. We can still achieve this peace, but only if we in Europe are all united in support of Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Botenga, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, you're asking for a seat at the negotiating table. In principle, I can agree with that. I think basically the EU should have a seat at the table, but then you have to tell the truth. You've done everything in your power for almost 4 years to be excluded from that position. The Vatican, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia have all been trying to be mediators. You didn't support them. We've had plans or proposals for peace from Indonesia, China, Brazil, from a delegation of African leaders who couldn't in the end count on support of the Europeans. And suddenly it's your favourite ally, not ours, who's leading the negotiations, and now you're upset. Well, I think it's important to say today that when Ukrainians should accept certain measures, then we should be involved. For example, on restriction of armed forces, I'm not in favour, but the Ukrainians in Istanbul in 2022 said that we wanted an army of 250,000. Trump says 600,000. Ukraine today would accept 800,000, and suddenly you're saying it's not acceptable for Europe. Are you taking the 69% of the Ukrainians seriously, who's saying they want a peaceful solution to stop this war, while you're trying to perpetrate this war further? Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Botenga. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Goma. President, Ms. von der Leyen, colleagues, once again, Europe has not taken the initiative. Not in the negotiations, no proposals for mediation. Europe is behind the Ukrainian position. If it's justifiable morally, we can't hear that politically or diplomatically. The European are tailing the Americans. We're in the reaction, and we are reacting. We seem that we are prepared to fight until the last Ukraine. We can't guarantee peace unless you can make war. And who wants to make war? What country here will send its children to Ukraine? don't all put your hands up. If we think we have sanctions which are got round, and the sanctions are not strong enough to make Russia give in, the resilience of the population, enough arms, the population in Ukraine has its doubts with all the corruption scandals going on. Not because we don't want, because we haven't had the capacity to do more. And that's the last point that's important. Our dependence on the Americans when it comes to resources and commandments, we are not free to decide. We must decide ourselves for ourselves. We should have a sincere rearmament. We should have things in our own hands so that we can conduct war independently. Give us credible means. As a military chief, if you can win a war, you have to be able to surprise. Let's act to create our own security architecture. Thank you.
Monsieur Omar, Vice President Picerno.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President, Madam Minister. Ukraine is not only defending its own sovereignty, its own independence, its own freedom. It's defending the principle that Europe and its borders cannot be changed by force. And every proposal which contradicts that principle is not building truth. It's simply preparing the next war. Trump's plan has nothing whatsoever to do with peace. It's built up to legitimate the Kremlin's expansion and to bring into question the very security architecture that has guaranteed stability and peace on our continent for decades. So what can we do? We have to stand together, we have to be courageous, and we have to say that peace is born of rights, not from surrender. And we have to repeat here in this hemicycle that no one can ever force us to accept an immoral text, because that's what Trump's text is. It treats European security as a variable and crimes committed by the Kremlin as a detail that can be sidelined. It's not acceptable.
Non rimandare a domani.
Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. So I would say, don't put off tomorrow and mess things up when you can actually conclude successfully today. But the rhetorics are different. The resistant Ukraine is winning. And Ms. von der Leyen here in this chamber is talking about the way the Russians are reacting and attacking us, and the sanctions that Mr. Rubio is saying is bringing Kremlin to its knees. And the mainstream is convinced how Russia is fighting tooth and nail, and we managed to attack Nord Stream 2 ourselves. So, you know, you can believe the leaflets and the propaganda, but the battlefield will tell you a different story. Yesterday, in Kupiansk and Kupovsk, there were bombs that fell. 160,000 Ukrainians during the course of 2025 alone have left their shores so as not to have to fight on the front. And these famous taxpayers' money that Ms. von der Leyen was quoting in her speech is being used to buy golden toilets and villas in Russia and yachts. So Russia is just a step away. And, I mean, if you call things by their name, then it shouldn't be Putin or Trump who will bring about an end to the war.
Mr. Mularczyk, you have the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, with all my firmness, must I say that the peace plan that is debated today gives rise to basic misgivings and criticisms from Poland and Central European states. This is rather like Putin's wish list and not a genuine compromise between the aggressor and the offerer of aggression. This is about territorial concessions to Russia and further Finlandization of Ukraine. Poland, even if it is a NATO and EU member, has borders on Ukraine, and yet it does not participate in peace talks in Geneva, in spite of the fact that we have received so many refugees. We are not at the negotiation table. How come that your protege, Donald Tusk, whom you support so fiercely, is not present at the negotiation table, does not represent Polish state? Without Poland, there won't be a just and lasting peace. There won't be an architecture for Europe. This will be just a resting time for Russia to prepare for a new attack in 5 years' time.
Dear colleague, Mr. Novakov, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, Commissioner, I was born in People's Republic of Bulgaria. Back then, part of Soviet-dominated communist world. I don't remember much of those times, but I know one thing for sure. The system was lying for everything. Was lying that there will be a milk in the grocery stores and had lied that nothing had happened in Chernobyl. The same system that lied that nothing had happened in Katyn forest, the same system that had lied that nothing had happened in Gulag. The same system today is telling us that this is not a war and this is a special operation. So please forgive us that we are not so enthusiastic and don't believe everything they're saying. In 1925, all countries decided never to use a poison gas in combat, and yet all countries kept their gas masks. With this, I'm saying that the peace deal is up to Ukraine. It's their land and their people. We should support the victim of aggression and never stop investing in our defense capacities. We made this mistake after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We should not do the same mistake again. We should develop our own defense capacity. We should develop our own potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. La señora Temido.
Obrigada, Presidente. Caros colegas, o momento que vivemos...
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, well, these are crucial times. There is a glimmer of hope that peace may return to Ukraine, and all of us hope that will prove true. But the question is, what can be accepted as peace? What kind of peace? A just and lasting peace? The Ukrainian people have to decide that. Certain principles have to be respected. The territorial integrity of Ukraine, sovereignty in choosing their alliances and joining the EU, reconstruction through reparations, bringing back prisoners of war and children, and also calling for an immediate ceasefire. But there are things that we cannot ignore. This is about international law, basic European principles, and a peace plan that's basically a plan of non-aggression, which is being negotiated with the exclusion of European countries, and that applies to us as a bloc as well. It's unthinkable that the assets should be released without us being involved. We need peace, but not capitulation. Thank you.
Colleagues, those who want peace do not impose it on an occupied country. Those who want peace do not blame victims for their assault. Those who want a lasting peace do not normalize criminals, and those who want peace do not coach the aggressor via phone on how best to cheat on European and American people. Today, Europe faces a truly defining moment. And yes, I and we welcome the proactive stance of leaders like Merz, Macron, Meloni, Stubb and others. But where's President Costa? Where is the one who represents all of them together? Where is the European Union united? We must unite for peace. This means sanctions cannot be lifted while a single Russian boot stands on Ukrainian soil. We must unite for peace. This means accountability cannot be negotiated away. International law is not a bargaining chip. We must unite for peace. Europe must act now decisively. Enlargement is the biggest currency we have. We must send a clear message, and the clearest we have is an accelerated path for Ukraine, including Article 42 that would protect Ukraine as a member of the European Union. We must do it for Ukraine, we must do it for ourselves.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Volgin, you have the floor.
Уважаеми колеги,
Colleagues, the war in Ukraine will only end when there is an official document signed by all the stakeholders that says that this country will not join NATO. NATO's neutrality is the most steady guarantee for peace in Europe. This, however, the renunciation of NATO membership for Ukraine, is absent from the so-called European peace plan. Why? Because the authors of that peace plan actually want the war to continue. The longer the better. Thus, they will continue to frighten us with the Russian threat, and more importantly, will be making the European Union into a military organization where all the money goes into rearmament. These are not people with a strategic vision for Europe. These are the salespeople of the military-industrial complex whose main fare is death. And while European citizens' money sink into the pockets of corrupt Ukrainian and European officials, our so-called leaders are drawing up absurd peace plans. Why? Because their main purpose is the continuation of war.
From the PP Group, Mr. Kanev, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Dear Mr. Volgin, I've been fascinated to hear from the far left and the far right praise of a so-called peace plan by Trump, while others who grew up in the East and learned some Russian know that it is rather a bad translation from Russian. Don't you think that your point on Ukraine's neutrality is also a bad translation from the Russian? Mr. Kanev, because both of us lived in those so-called communist days, and because they did lie to us at that time, as Mr. Novakov has just said, what the Union is doing now is very similar to what the Central Committee of the Communist Party was doing then, called black, white, and white, black, peace, war, and war, peace. This peace plan being Russian doesn't stand to scrutiny. I mean, you should not be misled. I thought higher of you, Mr. Novakov. And us, as citizens of the European Union, must work for peace. And all calls for more weapons and money for Ukraine will make this war last longer.
You have the floor.
Europe is at war. Acts of sabotage in Poland, violations of airspace, disinformation confirm this every day. Times of war clarify moral choices and attitudes. Everyone can decide how they want to be remembered, as a traitor destroying European unity or as a builder of security. Donald Tusk said here in the Parliament, Europe must believe in its own strength. We have accepted this task. Poland is present. We have built the SAFE instrument. We have 180 billion Polish zloty from the EU for Poland's security. We do not consent to a new world order dictated by Russia. We do not accept impunity for Amelka's murderers. The aggressor must be accountable for his crimes. Europe is strong in its alliances and unity. We invest in our defense capabilities. But the Law and Justice Party government
marginalized our position through alliances with Orban and Fico. It pushed for the construction of a power plant fueled by Russian coal. That is over now. The return of Donald Tusk is a return to ambitious politics. Thanks to the Polish presidency, Europe has focused on security. Dear friends, let's not panic. This is what Russia wants. Let's distinguish signals from noise. Let's nurture transatlantic cooperation. Allies must work together, but their envoys cannot be good advisors to our enemy. Europe, show your strength.
From Mr. Mularsik from the DCR Group, you don't accept it. Okay, thank you. Mi siguiente orador es el señor Sánchez Amor. Dear colleague, he hasn't accepted the blue card, so he's entitled to do that. Mr. Sánchez Amor.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. Well, I think there are two important points that are being left behind. We're talking about Russia and Ukraine in a way that we forget the basic thing, that right now, as in 22, there's an aggressor and a victim. And that brings in a moral judgment that we have to maintain, because we can't defend talking about the wins of the aggressor and vice versa. I think that really we have to do what is just, morally speaking, in Europe. It's like a teacher going out into the playground in a school and trying to sort out a fight and forcing the victim to give his sandwich to the aggressor. That's what we're seeing happening, basically. So we have to look at the international situation, because we could end up with protectorates and changes in the spheres of influence which have done such harm to international law. Thank you.
Everybody has said it, or almost, and we share this. It's neither desirable or in our interest that the treaty to end this war is the history of our peoples knows what it means to be wiped off the map. Ukraine shouldn't be kidnapped by Russia again. It's simplistic to starkly oppose morals and realism, but it's dangerous to ignore the realities. There's no military solution to this conflict which would end up in a decisive Ukrainian victory. We're talking about diplomacy, and not for the pleasure of writing self-satisfying resolutions, but with a view to reach a peace agreement which will be signed by the two parties in the conflict, Ukraine and Russia. Brilliant European minds have shown that it's necessary to have limits to the war, that it's dangerous to refuse to let the other party to be an interlocutor and to consider its destruction as the only possible outcome. Denying this interactional dimension which exists in war, it means that making the conditions for peace impossible. We should get away from the deplorable dilemma proposed in this hemicycle between pacifism and full war. If the peace is the objectives, is a game. It takes two to tango, and it's time that this reality is not ignored or is not ignored.
The peace agreement comes years too late. The warmongering bureaucracy in the EU thought that they could win a war with money, with badly thought out sanctions, and a people who's willing to sacrifice for those who see war as a video game. Now we're on the close of bankruptcy, and Russia is even more threatening and determined to crush Ukraine. And the money is going into the hands of corrupt people. Corruption, dirty secrets have overshadowed peace. But for the EU, war is a good choice. Ukraine, a country in shatters, is full of clandestine weapons. When Ukrainians understand that they were just cannon fodder, they will want revenge. They will, maybe they will set up an alliance with Russians, and we will wonder, when are we going to put an end to these warmongers? Thank you.
You have the floor.
Colleagues, Commissioner, how much humiliation does Europe have to suffer before we wake up and approach this differently? After the humiliating summer of 2025, when Trump foisted his 15% tariff on us that we had to swallow, once again, another humiliating development that we have to swallow, so-called peace plan for Ukraine, a plan that, colleagues, is basically just a diktat from Washington and Moscow, where Russia's being rewarded for its aggression and Ukraine is being forced to amputate both its territory and its army. Putin and Trump sit down together, and we, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a common European reaction at hand. This Trump peace is not a peace, it's a capitulated settlement. And that is painful for Ukrainians who've been fighting and suffering for Europe, for our freedom. And it just shows once again how shows clearly how weak we are. Let us address this humiliation to turn things around. Let's start saying no to Trump. Let's start demanding of Putin that he stops the hybrid attacks on Europe, that he respects international law, and that the kidnapped children be freed. Ladies and gentlemen, it has to become clear. If we are not able to speak with one voice, we can't push for the European pillar within NATO. If we can't even provide for our own European defence, then we're going to be irrelevant. And that will affect peace on our territory and our citizens. Let us do a little bit more now.
From Mr. Gratsoulis from the ESN group. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Then we go to Mr. Madison. You have the floor.
Yes, thanks so much, dear colleagues. Good morning. Anyway, I really believe that long-term and a fair peace currently being talked is not possible, not now. But it is possible to achieve a peace for some certain period, especially for resting time, and the peace for Ukrainian people and the fighters to keep and maintain the dignity and the statehood, what is the most important thing ever. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget that Russia has not given up its demands for so-called security guarantees that they presented to the USA on December 15, 2021, 2 months before attacking Ukraine. And with those demands, they demanded directly there should be no military exercises in the new NATO member states. There should be no new member states like Finland, who's a now member state. And they have never, ever given up those demands. So the peace for the future, for the long term, it is not possible, realistically. But at the same time, we have to get the peace for some certain period for Ukraine. And at the same time, Europe has to forget all the small talk, bullshit about the green ideology, about the beautiful things. And we have to prepare to protect ourselves, to keep the security. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Madame Rigorova, you have the floor.
Vážení kolegové.
Dear colleagues, after reading the 28-point peace plan, we collectively held our breaths, and that was good, because this was not a plan to negotiate. This was Putin's shopping list, and Washington now knows that this is not the way. It's very good that we've proposed our own points, realistic security guarantees, a strong Ukrainian army, and instead of giving Donbass, the rest of Donbass, to the Russians without fighting, the Ukraine will try to regain the occupied territories diplomatically while the rest of the country goes back to normal. Anything that the Ukrainians agree with, I can agree with, because this is about them. But I want to remind everyone, dear colleagues, that until we have a signed peace plan, Ukrainians need a negotiating table that they can sit at. They don't need a country that's been bombarded the hell out of. And to attain this can only be done by military support. Drone systems, anti-drone systems, missiles and rockets. Without that, we can only talk about a peace plan. With this, the Russians wouldn't be in Lviv and in Kiev. Let's hold our positions. Thank you.
Mr. De La Valle, you have the floor.
President, the EU has to decide whether it wants to with peace or continue as it is, maybe even sending its own people to fight this war that's been going on too long. The peace agreement could be just around the corner, it's true, but we know that the last mile is always the hardest. And we saw in Istanbul, UK, EU, when they blew it all up. And they're going to try again. And the saboteurs are always working in the shadows. Meloni, von der Leyen, Macron. Everyone has betted on the military defeat of Russia because Russia's war basically... without the rearm EU, it would all have been collapsed. If you haven't understood, the fact is that with this strategy, you have lost the war. But unfortunately, it's been trumped to show your irrelevance to the world. It's obvious that it's not going to be Brussels, Paris or London to decide and determine the future of Ukraine. In Istanbul, the EU lost the opportunity to show that it's something still. But I think you do better to leave space for compromise because a poor peace is better than the alternative or from a dirty war, which is yours. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Señor Burgalo.
Gracias, Presidente. Dear colleagues, a Portuguese poet once...
Thank you, President.
Today, we may not know what tomorrow will bring, but we know this. A true peace strengthens the invaded, not the invader. After 4 years of fighting, Ukraine has the right to keep what they fought so hard to defend and to recover what Russia took by force. After 4 years of fighting, we cannot tell the Ukrainians that Russia's war crimes will end with a Russian peace. They will not. If geography is not enough for us to see it, history should be. And in their history, every time Ukraine has agreed on disarmament, their sovereignty was compromised. Fellow members, a peace deal that disarms Ukraine will only empower Putin. If we have no Ukraine in NATO and no NATO in Ukraine, we will have Russia in Europe. We may not know what tomorrow will bring, but we know this. To defend Ukraine is not only to defend democracy and international law. To defend Ukraine is to defend Estonian schools, Lithuanian hospitals, Polish homes and Finnish families. To defend Ukraine is to defend Europe. And nothing can be achieved, no Draghi report, no common market, no secured borders, if we give in to Moscow. Europe must be willing to talk, but not to yield. We are eager for peace as long as it doesn't mean more war. We may not know what tomorrow will bring, but we must be ready for it. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Burgalo. Monsieur Germain.
Monsieur le Commissaire.
Commissioner, Minister, Ukraine is encountering one of the most difficult junctures in its history. That's what Mr. Zelensky is saying, reacting to Mr. Trump's approach. Occupation of territory, refusal of being able to join NATO, not using frozen assets, reduction of their troops, and undermining security, which is already fragile. This is a plan that's been concocted by the White House and basically just panders to the Russian demands. Regardless of who's at the center of this photo, we have to make sure that we can turn a capitulation of 28 points to a 19-point compromise. Europe is expected at this time, because we are the prime financiers of the war chest here. So if we haven't worked out how to use the frozen assets, we need to look at the 140 billion that need to go to Ukraine by 2026, 2027 through the European Court. I think there's no better place for Ms. von der Leyen, for the taxpayer of helping fund this war to stop Ukrainians falling on the front line. Russia will be pressing us. We can only go as far as they allow us, so we need to turn this around, allow Ukrainians to be free.
Dear colleagues, for 2 years you couldn't mention the word peace in Brussels. It was a swear word. Diplomatic steps were not seen as a duty but as a mistake. Anyone who was asking for pragmatic solutions was rejected, made fun of, or labeled as pro-Russian. And now these same people who were doing this are trying to catch up to the world superpowers, finding a way forward without Europe. This isn't leadership, this is failure. Europe has been sleeping, it has not been pragmatic, it did not want peace. While Brussels was hiding in its safety of activism, the others were acting. And today, Europe is idly standing by at debates where our security is decided. Europe is one of the largest financial supporters of Ukraine. In many cases, this was support without any clear or finite plans on using these monies. Ukraine has to fight corruption. It has to set transparent procedures so that all aid goes where it's needed. The original American peace plans are detrimental to Europe in many ways. For example, the USA getting its share of the frozen Russian assets, or the expected participation of Europe on post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. However, the EU needs a stable Ukraine. We need a peace solution on strong fundaments and with strong security guarantees. The PFE has been saying from the very start, talking about peace is not a weakness, it is our duty. Europe needs solid, pragmatic diplomacy, open negotiations with the USA, and a long-term plan for security in our eastern neighborhood. If Europe is to be relevant again, it needs to stop rejecting pragmatism. It needs to be pragmatic. Thank you.
Speaker is Mr. Jaki for 1 minute, please.
Dziękuję, pani przewodnicząca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, as the classicist told you, it is a madness to do all the same things all the time and expect new results. Well, war was a sum of the vanity of European leaders, the Minsk agreement, mind you, and now the better off are in Geneva and the rest of Europe was simply brushed aside. So it's like naivety, it's like not learning lessons. Russia has not changed. It's not going to abide by any agreement. But yet, there are people who believe in it. Well, you are all flexing your muscles and say how you are against Putin and in favor of peace. But you really don't remember things. When the war broke out, you didn't want to do anything. You just provided Ukrainians with helmets, nothing more. And nobody was held accountable for resets with Russia. So no sustainable peace is available unless Russia is defeated, unless it is deterred, and Russia is not keeping its promises and excluding the countries that are most at risk from the decision-making process.
Speaker for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, wie wil er geen vrede?
Who doesn't want peace? Peace for our time. Who could be against that? The question is just how are we going to achieve that peace for our time? Are we going to achieve it with this 28-point plan from Mr. Putin, communicated by Mr. Trump, supported by the far left and far right in this chamber, and the capitulation plan as it was in the Sudetenland in 1938. Peace in our time was a quote from Mr. Chamberlain. We know how that ended. Can we trust Putin's word? He's already ignored and violated tens of international treaties. Of course we can't. So what should the point of departure be? Genuine security guarantees for Ukraine, a guarantee of the sovereignty of Ukraine. That is the only way to guarantee peace. But it's a lesson for us too here, ladies and gentlemen. Europe doesn't have hard power. We're a bystander. We're not an actor. We're not a protagonist. And we are not able to help out in Ukraine. It's only through a true European defence that we can guarantee a lasting defence and freedom for Europe. Let us work at that.
Next speaker is Mr. Van Laanschot for 1 minute, please.
The 28-point plan was written in Kremlin handwriting while they keep killing Ukrainian civilians every single day. A complete disgrace. The gangsters leading the US and Russia try to impose a modern-day Molotov-Ribbentrop pact on Europe, a pretext for more war. 1 minute to midnight, Europe arrived to support Ukraine, trying to prevent the disaster. But European leaders, how much more evidence do you need that dictators don't respect flattery, only strength? How much more evidence do you need that with 27 little armies, 27 foreign ministers, and the vetocracy in council, we are at the gangsters' mercy? How much more evidence do you need that a peace that lasts will only come if we enable Ukraine to win? This resolution is the same routine. It complains about America and Russia, but it mentions almost nothing about what we will do. Ukraine's security is Europe's security. Let's get out of this inferiority complex. We have what it takes to become what the USA no longer is, a united democracy defending freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Stoyanov for 1 minute, please.
Благодаря, госпожо председател. Вярвам, че сме в навечерието на преломен момент и дипломатическите усилия на Съединените щати и Руската федерация.
Thank you. I believe we are at a turning point, and I wish success to all those working to end the bloodshed. Of all the proposals put forward, President Trump's plan is the most realistic one and offers a way ahead. The lifting of sanctions set out in it is a step that I welcome. And it is a good time for the EU to adopt a constructive approach, act proactively, and support this initiative. Peace through diplomacy is the stronger option than peace through war. Nobody wants war. And peace could have been achieved already in Istanbul, but that opportunity was wasted. And the conditions for Ukraine at the time would have been much better than today, and hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. A better time for peace than now there will not be. Let us learn the lessons of Istanbul and support diplomatic efforts in the name of peace.
Speaker is Ms. Rod Nevedalova for 1 minute, please.
Ďakujem, pani predsednička. Vážené kolegyne, kolegovia, mali by sme...
Thank you, colleagues. We should stop behaving like a sulking teenager not invited to a party. We should seriously negotiate peace. It's not us setting the conditions. I think it's now time focusing on peace and diplomacy, but accepting any plan that both parties are willing to negotiate. We have not really moved an inch. The war is still going on. Thousands of people are dying. Cities are being destroyed. Infrastructure is being destroyed. The economic crisis is worse and worse, instability as well. When we lie to ourselves that Ukraine is our partner, that this is our war, that's one thing. But we see at the same time that we're pumping money into Ukraine and the corruption apparently is blooming. They are not upholding the minority rights, religious rights. Now this is enough. It's high time for us to be part of the peace solution, and we should really not come up with more and more problems.
And we have now come to the 7th round of speakers, and I give the floor to Mr. Toviri for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. The now infamous 28-point peace plan started a series of negotiations that are still ongoing. Everybody knows, or at least they should know here, that this is not a serious attempt to reach a peace from Russian side. This is just Putin's attempt to delay and win time to kill more Ukrainians, and unfortunately it works. Nobody talks about planned new sanctions to Russia anymore. Putin doesn't want peace. But to make a peace, we need Russia genuinely to participate in real negotiations and willing to give up its ambitions to destroy Ukraine as an independent sovereign nation. Therefore, now it's time to force Russia to come to the table. And EU can help this to happen by hitting Russia's already crumbling economy. Now it's time to stop the shadow fleet. Now it's time to stop funding Putin's war by buying Russian oil, gas and minerals. Now it's time to sanction all Russian oligarchs, also those who are doing business in member states. Now it's time to stop allowing our businesses to evade sanctions through third countries.
And now it's time to sanction those companies and countries that support Russia's war fighting. Let's do our part so that the brave Ukrainian fighting also for our freedom and security can have a peace they truly deserve. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Kremer for 1 minute, please.
Colleagues, I want nothing more than these peace negotiations to succeed. But let's be honest, these 28 points weren't a peace plan. They were Putin's Christmas list to Santa Claus. They asked Ukraine to surrender what Putin has failed to conquer in a decade and to weaken Ukrainian defenses in a way that will only invite future war, future aggression from Russia. And dismantling Ukraine wasn't even the biggest gift under little Vladimir's Christmas tree. The real price is that this plan would have not just thrown Ukraine, but Europe under the bus. Colleagues, we keep saying nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing about Europe without Europe, but we are not acting like it. Instead, we keep hoping that the Americans might sweep in and save the day. But spoiler alert, they won't. If we want real peace in Europe, we cannot count on Trump any more than we can on Santa Claus. If we want real peace in Europe, we must take responsibility ourselves and force Putin to the negotiating table, but not through appeasement, but through strength. If we want real peace in Europe, we need to take the initiative now as Europe and use Russia's frozen assets as a leverage for peace. Colleagues, the time for wish lists is over. Now is the time to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Affirmed for 1 minute, please.
Pászka Zoltán, Rácz Attila, Lecó Zsolt.
Zoltán Pászka, Opilan Rácz, Zsolt Lecó. These are just a few of the Hungarians who have died in the war. They're all Hungarians from Transcarpathia, just where I'm from. I'm sure their parents would have a word or two to say to military leaders in Europe and how to react to this sort of approach. I think the answer is that we haven't been preparing for this. We've seen this war raging for almost 4 years. Many families have lost members of their families in this war, and you're telling us that this peace plan isn't good enough. You're financing this war while people in Ukraine are putting their own lives at risk. That's a very cynical approach. When was the last time you met those involved? When did you last ask them if they wanted war or peace? Once again, we have an opportunity for peace. We have to grasp it.
Yes, Mr. Inselvini for 1 minute, please.
Finalmente uno spiraglio.
Finally, there's a glimmer of light, the possibility of giving voice to diplomacy and laying down arms to achieve just and lasting peace in Ukraine. It's a shame that once again this brave initiative hasn't come from the EU, but we have instead to thank Trump's USA that is trying with their long-sightedness and bravery. So we've seen what's happened with the Middle East as well. Someone here in the national government is always irritated by the possibility of putting end to the tragedy of an ongoing war. The peace plan from Trump is not perfect, but even if Zelensky is ready to sit at the table on the basis of this proposal, it's clear that there is no other possibility or solution for the EU than to make itself available to bring the negotiations to a good outcome. This is the last hope for millions. Let's grasp that hope together, guaranteeing the future of Ukraine, security in Europe, and pushing aside the war approach of people who want escalation and a return to 1914.
Speaker is Vice President González Pons for 1.5 minutes, please.
Dear colleagues, the peace plan put forward by the US administration offers a possible path to end the war. But it also brings serious risk for the future of Ukraine and Europe if it is not built with clarity, certainty and courage. Talks started in Geneva and will continue for the next days, but the European Union cannot and must not be silent. Europe should talk about enlargement, sanctions or the immobilized assets. Those can be negotiated without us. We want peace, but not peace at any price. Not if that peace reduces the safety for our Union or our member states. Not if that peace humiliates the Ukrainian people and leaves them open to a future slavery. Not if that peace does not return Ukrainian children to their families where they belong. Not if that peace fails to bring war criminals to justice. Not if that peace becomes one more appeasement of a tyrant. Not if that peace means surrender, because democracy can only win. This is about giving back Belarus to freedom, not about losing it in Ukraine. Dear colleagues, our work must continue, united and with a joint and strong voice. Let the world know where we are, where we stand together till the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Guzenina for 1 minute, please.
Dear President, history teaches us hard lessons. 1925, Germany signed the Locarno Treaties. 34, the Non-Aggression Pact with Poland. 38, the Munich Agreement. All presented as peace efforts, all used to buy time for further aggression. So let's not forget, not every peace is a real peace. Today, we face similar risk. The United States is leading talks on a proposal for Ukraine, and we see clearly what Russia is willing to accept, so clearly that Washington had to explain that the plan was not written by Putin. It is the US and Russia who are shaping the talks and setting the terms. The agreement would limit Ukraine's army while Russia rebuilds its own. The agreement offers amnesties for war crimes and forces territorial concessions.
Thank you very much.
Europe must stand up. We will not agree.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Madame Loiseau for 1.5 minutes, please.
Madame la Présidente. President, colleagues, the American peace plan for Ukraine is not American, it's Russian. And it's not proposing peace, but rather capitulation. It's not a plan, it's a business plan. Nonetheless, 3 European countries rushed to Geneva, pressed and forced to be at the table rather than being left outside, and tried to improve the American plan. But that's a historic mistake to accept even the logic underlying the Trump plan. In my area, we know that you can pour perfume on a pile of manure, but it's still manure. And talking about the Ukrainian army and reducing its numbers, whereas it's the Russian army that is a threat, is ridiculous. So it's no point trying to change the commas with a bad text in Geneva. We know what we have to do. We have to use the frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine, protect the skies above Ukrainian cities by organizing defense and using the neighboring NATO countries. We have to help Ukraine to achieve a just, dignified and lasting peace, not drag it into a shameful situation which would solve nothing and which would affect our own security.
For 1 minute, please.
Fru talman. Madam President, we can see 2 imperialist superpowers, Russia and the US, who are trying to foist onto Ukraine an unjust peace. They set aside international law, they reward the aggressor, and they're lining their pockets. The Cold War's language and logic about the spheres of interest have come back. This is something that must be rejected. No negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine at the table. Ukraine's proposal for a ceasefire is the realistic way to proceed. Sanctions against Russia must continue in full force until Russia has withdrawn from the entire territory of Ukraine. No amnesty for war criminals. Continued support for Ukraine in economic terms, political terms and military terms. Thank you.
Tack så mycket.
Thank you.
And we will now start the 8th and last round of speakers before Catch the Eye, and we will begin with Mr. Terras for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President. Dear colleagues, the initial White House capitulation plan prepared by Russia, which completely and shamelessly ignores dozens of rules of international law, cannot be basis for realistic negotiations. Europe's future cannot be decided without Europe. Ukraine's destiny cannot be decided without Ukraine. It is time for European countries, in cooperation with Ukraine, to propose just, permanent and lasting peace. This could be a coalition of willing plus non-Euro countries if there is no consensus for joint EU action. This House must urge Presidents von der Leyen and Costa to work out a way to use frozen Russian assets immediately, and needlessly to say, all Member States must stop financing Russian war machine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Vice President Negrescu for 1 minute, please.
Dear Commissioner, dear Vice President, the US proposal for a peace plan marks an important moment. Any initiative that can bring an end to Russia's brutal war must be examined seriously, but should come with guarantees for Ukraine's sovereignty and Europe's security. Nevertheless, Russia sent drones again over Romanian territory. These incidents are a reminder of the challenges faced by frontline countries. The Black Sea has become a strategic target, and the EU and the US must provide, in any peace agreement, clear security guarantees for the eastern flank. We cannot afford ambiguity. At the same time, the Republic of Moldova and several EU countries face constant hybrid threats and attacks aimed at destabilizing their democracies. Supporting our resilience must be a central element of any European engagement for a just and lasting peace. Europe, together with our US partner, must remain united and firm. Any peace plan must uphold international law, ensure real security guarantees, and prevent dangerous concessions that would threaten the stability of our region. A responsible, shared and durable peace is the only path that protects our citizens and our common values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. De Mutter for 1 minute, please.
Az Economist pár hete bankjegyekkel és katonai sisakkal.
Some weeks ago, the Economists show banknotes, and it said the great opportunity for Europe. So Europe is stumping up to be the financing. You're fulfilling this expectations. 187 billion has been spent, and now you want to have an even larger sum within the MFF, and then you want to take on board debt too. Your war fixation shows that you're not taking the opportunity of peace negotiations. You've taken the word peace out of the title of this debate. When the war ends, Europe will be in a weaker position economically and in its self-esteem. And if you ask who is responsible for this, Ursula von der Leyen and all those who supported this madness here. You are the ones who are destroying Europe.
Catch the Eye. And the next speaker is Mr. Terhes for 1 minute, please.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. In 2008, when few Western countries blocked the clear path to NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia, the Russian leadership interpreted it as a weakness, and weakness always invites aggression. Only months later, Russia invaded Georgia, demonstrating that Kremlin was fully prepared to wage war in the 21st century to subjugate European free and sovereign nations. The world's weak response opened the door for further escalation. In 2014, Russia struck again, annexing Crimea and invading eastern Ukraine. The full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine launched in 2022 is a direct consequence of years of appeasement in which the West ignored Moscow's repeated aggressions and convinced itself that rewarding aggression or doing business with the aggressor somehow would keep the peace. It did the opposite. Supporting Ukraine defend its sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity is not charity. It's an investment in Europe's security and in lasting peace on our continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Kelly for 1 minute, please.
Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Appeasing bullies won't stop wars. Yes, we need a plan to end this war, to end the destruction and the violence, but how we bring that about matters. This is not a surrender. There can be no decisions made without Ukraine and without Europe. Russia does not get to dictate the future security of Ukraine or of Europe. The fundamental principle that borders cannot be changed by force remains paramount. And under no ceasefire agreement should the front lines be frozen where they currently are. Creating peace by granting Russia all its demands is not the way we do business in Europe. To do so would only encourage other authoritarian regimes to attack neighbouring countries in the sure knowledge that for the sake of peace they'd be given more land. And as Ursula von der Leyen pointed out, this would lead to more wars in the due course. We need a real peace plan, not a capitulation plan. Slava Ukraine, Ukraine Abu.
Mr. Kelly, thank you very much. There is a blue card from Mr. Grasulis. Do you want to take it?
Okay.
Yes, please. Seat 525.
Mr. You represent the biggest group in the European Parliament, in the governing majority. The Commission President is from your group. Aren't you ashamed that you are only discussing, making resolutions, but do not provide the necessary military, diplomatic or other support to Ukraine, but only blame Mr. Trump? You are not showing all the necessary things that you have to do.
Yeah, this is not about blame. This is about being realistic. The plan proposed by the US in the name of Donald Trump makes no sense. It's a capitulation. And without the support of Europe, both in terms of taking in refugees and supporting Ukraine in the war, they would have been overrun long ago by Russia. Peace, to be realistic, has to be fair, and particularly fair to those who are suffering. And in this instance, it's Ukraine that's suffering. Russia started the war, and that mustn't be forgotten.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Karlsbro. For 1 minute, please.
Madam President, colleagues, day and night Russia continues to terrorize and kill Ukrainian people and destroy homes and infrastructure. Since the beginning of the war, it has been clear Russia must pay. Europe must make use of the frozen assets, and we must increase our own financial contributions. It's not a question of either or. Since 2022, tariff-free trade with the EU has served as an economic lifeline for Ukraine. This commitment must stand firm until Ukraine is a full member of the European Union. Today, Ukraine is our front line. Ukrainians defend our freedom. We must show the same commitment to them. We stand with Ukraine.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Sienkiewicz for 1 minute, please.
Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, let's be very clear. The so-called peace plan is not a peace at all. It forces Ukraine to concede territory, forgives war crimes such as rape, killings of civilians, 20,000 abducted children, and just rewards the aggressor. It can be called a business plan. But here in Europe, we don't sell our dignity and freedom. It also can be seen as a license to continue. And if you look at the Russian position, when it's the best time to test us, when it's the best time to attack Europe? Right now, when we are still not ready, when we are still discussing on our military capabilities, on frozen assets, on continuous support to Ukraine, right now is the best time to test us with such business deal that US is offering.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Neuhoff for 1 minute, please.
Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Colleagues, you can imagine whatever you like in your heads, but as long as you refuse to look at the Russian perspective, as long as you continue to do that, the Ukraine conflict won't be solved. You will just drag it out, and that will hurt Ukraine. A workable peace plan must look at the root causes of the Russian invasion. That means Ukraine as a neutral bloc, no entry into NATO, no nuclear weapon for Ukraine, and no NATO troops in Ukraine. As long as we don't have these issues addressed, the war will be continued by Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, we admire Switzerland for its neutrality. Back in 1815, there was the Vienna conflict, which made Switzerland a buffer zone, because that was what the major powers wanted. Ukraine could become a Switzerland of the East. But the question is, do you even want that?
Card from Mr. Brandstetter. Do you want to take it? Thank you, Mr. Brandstetter.
Wait. Herr Neuhoff, Sie waren ja gerade.
You were in Sochi, in Russia. Not everyone was very enthusiastic about that, and you met Medvedev, and you spoke to Russians. They're always threatening to send things to Berlin and so on. Then there was a quote from Lucas. It says that hardly anybody knows that I am working so passionately for Russia's victory as Mr. Neuhoff. What would you say about that quote? And would you want to take colleagues to Russia?
Herr Kollege, zu Ihren konkreten Fragen.
Colleague, the concrete question. We did not meet with Mr. Medvedev. So the wish of the party leaders was respected, but that wasn't what it was even about at the conference. The invitation, it was about looking at BRICS, EU relations, and MEPs should therefore logically be taking part in such a conference. You have the possibility to look at every single one of the speeches I've given. I'm neither pro-Russian nor anti-Russian. I'm just a realist. For that reason, here in this parliament, I have always pleaded for a realistic solution, as I just did in my speech.
So I don't see Mr. Mixer in the room, so we will now go to Catch the Eye. And colleagues, thanks to your relative discipline, we have there is a likelihood that I can take all the Catch the Eye. I have 16 or 17. Not all are here in the room, but I will try to accommodate it. So if you stick to your speaking time, 1 minute, we can take, hopefully, all of the colleagues. And we start with Mr. Jonski, seat 494, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. In this chamber today, we are talking about the 28 points of the peace plan for Ukraine. But let's call a spade a spade. This is not a peace plan. This is a document which is not going to end the war, but will only allow for a division of Ukraine and will only make the whole of the EU weaker. Today, we know very well who wrote it. It was dictated by the Kremlin. You cannot build peace by rewarding the aggressor. Enforcing the concessions for the murder will not bring silence, but yet more demands on the part of the Kremlin. This would be only a short-lasting peace, and it would open doors for yet more and more attacks. I want you to hear today that we want peace that guarantees security and safety for Ukraine and for the whole of Europe. Europe cannot succumb to force. We need to be on the side of justice, freedom and solidarity, because only then will the peace will be true and long-lasting. Thank you very much.
Speaker is Mr. Lopez Aguilar, seat 316, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Comisión, en este debate sobre
in this debate on the badly carried through peace plan, we've got the first source, which is the first reality. We've got the conversations between Trump and Putin. That's what they say. But the EU hasn't been invited and nor has been listened to. And we can't change the behavior of the Putin regime. And at the same time, we don't want to be a tenant in the White House. We've got Viktor Orban and Robert Fico as well. And what we need to do is carry out the sanctions that have been adopted instead of adopting a whole new package every 2 months, which is inefficient. What we can do is strengthen our unity. We can do this by protecting the judges, protecting the International Criminal Court as well against Putin. They're being threatened not just by Putin, but also by Trump. And so we need to strengthen our unity by deciding for once and for all on the mobilization of the financial assets that have been confiscated from Russia for financing not just the Ukrainian war effort, but also reconstruction. Thank you very much.
And the next speaker is Ms. Gosiewska, seat 686, please.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. This debate is not only about the EU's position towards the proposed peace plan. Our credibility is at stake. Can we go along with the solution that will reward the aggressor and punish the victim? Can we pretend to build our European safety on a situation in which Ukraine is tying its own hands and Russia is not held accountable for the havoc it wreaked in Ukraine? What about the soldiers who were defending their country? Should they just go back home, come to terms with the fact that Crimea and Donbas are lost? What will we say to the Tatars? What will we tell the children who lost their parents? Will we say that they have died in vain, that they are just as responsible as Putin? We need to stand with Ukraine. This is a rotten compromise. We need to cherish the memory of the victims. This is a rotten compromise, telling Putin that aggression pays off, which puts Poland into a dangerous situation.
Is 1 minute, please. The next speaker is Mr. Salimas, seat 324, please.
Thank you. Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, we must be clear. Any agreement that rewards aggression would not bring peace. It would send us several centuries backwards, legitimizing violence as a tool in international relations. International law is explicit. When a serious breach of a fundamental norm of jus cogens occurs, and Russia's war of aggression is precisely that, no state may recognize as lawful the situation created by that breach, nor render aid or assistance to the aggressor. Instead, states must cooperate to bring this breach to an end. This means no recognition of illegal annexation, no territorial concessions, no any other proposals that would allow anyone to make a business deal out of this aggression. A just peace can only rest on firm foundations: full territorial integrity of Ukraine, full reparations to Ukraine, full criminal responsibility for the crime of aggression. These are not negotiating positions. They are international legal obligations incumbent on Russia.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Saramo, seat 230, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. If it looks like a Russian asset, talks like a Russian asset, and acts like a Russian asset, then it probably is a Russian asset. We can only guess why, but Donald Trump has always done what Vladimir Putin wanted. Of course, Putin is not the only one. Trump has shown his admiration for other authoritarian leaders who have blood on their hands. He does not bring peace, only new tensions, and he rewards killing. We Finns, we tried until the very end to build friendship and stability with Putin's Russia. But imperialist delusions, they cannot be answered by reason. Capitulation to Putin and Trump would bring new occupations and new wars. Dear colleagues, Europe must do everything to support Ukraine and cut off the US leash. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Grasoulis, seat 525, please.
Dear Europeans, blame yourselves and not Trump. If you were determined and principled and not just talked and passed resolutions, if you defended Ukraine, Putin would not have dared to invade Ukraine. But he knew your leftist gender politics, which is not determined and not principled. You are the ones to blame. You are to blame for Ukraine's suffering today. For 4 years it has not been defended. If you were principled, you would say to Trump, it's not your business. We will end the war without you. And what are you doing? Aren't you ashamed for such undetermined position? Please brace yourselves. Please suggest your plan without Trump and demand Putin to end the war. What have you done? What are you doing? It's precisely nothing.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Stier, seat 675, please.
Thank you, Vice President. Dear colleagues, the Commission President said today that the pressure should be put on the aggressor, not on the victim. And I fully agree with that. But then we need to move from words to action. And that means, among other things, that we should ban the import not only of gas, but also of oil. That is the position of this Parliament, and it's about time that the Council also agrees on that position to ban all the imports of Russian oil starting on January 2026. The Commission knows very well that all the technical conditions are there for the Member States that are still importing oil from Russia to replace that, using, for example, the Adriatic pipeline. They can do that. All the technical conditions are there. It's just a question of political will. So we need to move from words to action, because actions, that means far more than words. That speaks louder than any words. Acta, non verba.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Andriukaitis, seat 179, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, the shameful 28-point Trump's plan is heavily skewed in favor for the Kremlin. A sustainable peace for Ukraine must be based on, first, full respect of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, second, full respect of Ukraine's right to choose its alliances, third, full Russian accountability for the war crimes and crime of aggression. Fourth, non-negotiable Russian payments for the massive damage caused in Ukraine. The ambivalence of President Trump's policy towards Ukraine is shameful and detrimental to the objective of achieving sustainable peace for Ukraine. A pact at the expense of Ukraine and the EU would jeopardize decades-long transatlantic partnerships on common security and prosperity. Now we need to urgently ask EU member states and international partners to join our efforts in their military support as well as their political and diplomatic efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Tynkkynen, seat 210, please.
Arvoisa puhemies, tällä salilla.
Madam President, this hemicycle really is not speaking very well. It says that it's doing everything for Ukraine, but that is nonsense. During the first term, Trump said to Europe that we needed to improve our defence so we can protect ourselves. We did not do that. Trump said that Nord Stream should not be built, but it was done nonetheless. And now, during this war in Ukraine, the EU has even been buying more Russian gas than before. Belgium doesn't want to use the frozen Russian assets. Germany didn't want to provide weapons. And we have created a situation ourselves where Ukraine is perhaps going to lose parts of its territory. The chance here will be that Russia could win. 33% of the budget is going into environment. The priorities are the right ones here.
8-9, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The huge majority in Europe wants peace, and the huge majority in this House wants peace. But Putin wants war, and the right-wing extremists support Putin. I did not hear one critical word about Putin. They support the war criminal. And the US, Witkov, he's not a negotiator. He wants to make deals with his former friends in Russia, and that is dangerous for Europe, and we must understand that. And then I heard from Hungarians about corruption in Ukraine. Yes, there is corruption in Ukraine, but there are very strong institutions, NABU and SAP, they are fighting corruptions. So I ask the people from Hungary here, the Orban people, go to Ukraine, go to Kiev, look how it is to fight corruption instead of being corrupt, and then you will have a huge advantage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Oliveira, seat 125, please.
President, Mr. Dombrovskis, we don't really know what Trump's plan is for Ukraine or how it could end the war. We have some official information on the EU stance, and what we've heard in this debate is the repetition of arguments that will drag out the war, and Ukraine is a pretext to further militarize the EU. We talk about the war, but we continue to militarize, and that, of course, increases our spending. If we look at the EU defense program, and we look at the Trump plan, all of that means that we will further affect the people. This is a billion euro industry where we continue to manufacture weapons. And this will just fill the pockets of the defense magnates, and it will force young people to their graves. Ursula von der Leyen is choosing one side, and we are choosing the other side.
Speaker is Ms. Glavak, seat 419, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, it is completely clear that we cannot allow this historic precedent to happen, to reward an aggressor with imperialistic tendencies, and we cannot allow the moving of borders by force. I'm speaking from a perspective of a country that has gone through aggression, but also a peaceful reintegration of occupied areas. We very well know that lasting peace cannot be built without territorial integrity. This means that the Ukraine must decide itself about its future. Borders cannot be changed by violence, and any solution must reinforce the ability of the Ukraine to defend itself. I support the diplomatic efforts, and I also welcome any step that brings us closer to peace. But we can support only a solution which will respect Ukrainian sovereignty and reinforce the security of Europe. Europe must remain strong. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. González Casares, seat 130, please.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. We want peace in Ukraine, but this isn't a peace plan. This is a plan for capitulation, and it's written by Russia and accepted by the United States, as we've heard today through our conversations with Mr. Winkler. Europe should stay united and defend a Ukraine that can have a long-lasting peace. If we accept the terms of this agreement, we will have Putin's imperialism ever closer to us, and we will feel it ever more threatened. And so for this reason, we need to uphold our unity. And a message to the EPP: don't join them. They're not there for Europe. We're seeing this. They are allies of Putin in many cases. We need to keep our unity here. It's fundamental to do so for the future of Europe. Another point in the area of energy. This agreement is leading us to be subjugated to Russia and to the United States for many years to come. We need to get rid of fossil fuels from our economy. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Kanev, seat 495, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, it has been clearly revealed that the so-called Trump peace plan is nothing but a poor translation of Russian speaking points. And yet, today we listen to the far right and the far left in a coordinated message about the so-called Istanbul negotiations a few years ago, yet another translation of Russian speaking point. What we miss is a clear European plan, not only for peace in Ukraine, but on the architecture of European peace in the decades to come. We don't have the unity to achieve it because of the unanimity of decision required in foreign policy. But what we could make is to have a real European defense union based on such a vision for the security infrastructure for the decades to come, and any government willing to support Trump, Witkoff, Putin, and so on plans is free not to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Nykiel, seat 589, please.
Dear colleagues, an concession towards Putin just encourages Putin to be more aggressive, as evidenced by the history of Poland and the Baltic republics. Russia does not stop at one border. The whole world is talking about peace. But we need to remember that innocent people are still dying in Ukraine, children are suffering, families are losing everything. This is not an abstract discussion. This is about an everyday tragedy of many families. Poland has been directly affected by this war. We accepted millions of refugees. We are at the border. We are directly affected by what is happening, so we need to be able to have an impact on the final peace agreement. No lasting peace can be built on concessions towards terrorism. We need principles, we need unity. Thank you.
And the last speaker in the round of Catch the Eye is Ms. Grunkiewicz-Waltz, seat 836, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My patience was awarded at the end. So I will speak in Polish because it's very important for the opinion in Poland. Putin jest w drodze do klęski.
Putin is on his way to failure. Ukraine is going to win this war. If we don't realize this, we will never believe this. When Poland believed in 1939, if Poland had believed in 1999 that the Bolshevik Russia would occupy us, we wouldn't have won, and you would not be here in the West, but you would be at the Pyrenees line. Poland was only independent for 2 years, and if we had not stopped the Bolshevik wave, the wall between the East and West would be in the Pyrenees line. I don't like the fact that the sanctions are not being monitored in the adequate way. I follow very closely what kind of banks are operational in Russia. Why don't we eliminate all the banks from Russia? Well, because it's business.
Very much, colleague. So, colleagues, we still have 2 speakers left, so it's nice to see you coming into the chamber, but please take your seats and wait to talk until we have been voting. Thank you. The next speaker is, or I will give the floor back to the Commission and Commissioner Dombrovskis for wrapping up this debate, please.
Madam Chair, Madam Minister, honourable members. Let me start by reading out the title of this debate. EU position on the proposed plan and the EU engagement towards a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. The word peace is there in the title, contrary to what some Patriot members were claiming. Because a just and lasting peace for Ukraine is what we want to achieve, not capitulation for Ukraine. A just and lasting peace for Ukraine that respects its sovereignty and territorial integrity, does not set restrictions on Ukraine's defense capabilities, which would leave Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. A peace which ensures real security for Ukraine and Europe, not just serves as a prelude for further wars. Because Russia is openly talking about invading other countries, including EU and NATO countries. And if Russia will feel in any way vindicated regarding their aggression in Ukraine, it will only encourage more aggression. Strong and coordinated European engagement has yielded constructive progress in negotiations for a Ukraine peace plan. This included a solid European presence during discussions with Ukraine and the United States in Geneva, with participation notably by representatives of the European Commission. We welcome the progress made at meetings between US and Ukraine in Geneva. As their joint statement makes clear, this was a major step towards a just and lasting peace. So we commend significant efforts of Presidents Trump and Zelensky and their teams. There are issues still to be resolved, and we stand ready to continue to support this process. And we have made clear the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected in any credible plan. As we move forward, we must remain united.
Commissioner, one second. Dear colleagues, please be quiet. It's really difficult to hear what is being said. So please take your seats and please be quiet in respect for the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As we move forward, we must remain united and keep placing Ukraine's best interest at the center of our efforts. This is also about the security of our entire continent, now and in the future. Intensive European engagement will continue on all fronts to secure a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Europe has been on the forefront of supporting Ukraine since Russia launched its full-scale aggression. In total, the European Union and its member states has provided 187 billion euros in support. And Ukraine is facing very sizable financing needs in the coming 2 years. The Commission has recently provided the options paper, how to ensure this support. However, our options are limited by the fact that Ukraine is facing debt sustainability issues. So we cannot just provide another loan. Our support must come with strong grant-like features. And the option of the reparation loan can provide this kind of support without putting substantial fiscal burden on EU and its member states. As President von der Leyen has just said, we cannot see a scenario in which the European taxpayers alone pay the bill. This is Russia's war, and Russia is under an obligation to compensate Ukraine for the damages it has caused. That is why, under the European Union's leadership, already in 2024, G7 members unlocked 45 billion euros in additional funding for Ukraine under the Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Initiative. These G7 loans will be repaid using the profits generated by the immobilized Russian central bank assets in the EU. The implementation of existing ERA loans is progressing well.
Commissioner, I do apologize for this. I have to ask them again, please. Dear colleagues, we're still working up here. Please be quiet. Take your seats and be quiet and respect the Commissioner who is speaking right now. So please stay quiet. Colleagues, please stay quiet. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Commissioner, and I do apologize.
Thank you. The implementation of the existing ERA loans is progressing well. A total of 30.9 billion euros is already disbursed by G7 partners. The EU, with its last disbursement earlier this month, has now delivered its entire 18.1 billion euros contribution under this initiative to Ukraine. It also marks an important step. Russia is already beginning to pay for the destruction it has caused in Ukraine. But we cannot stop here. Ukraine's financing needs are not only sizable, but also urgent. So we cannot continue endless discussions about options for future funding. We must take concrete decisions, and the Commission is ready to present the legal text. To conclude, I would thank the European Parliament for its strong and unwavering support for Ukraine, for the sake of Ukraine itself, and for the sake of security of our entire continent. Ukraine has chosen a European destiny. Ukraine's future lies in the European Union. This is not only a matter of destiny. This is a core and essential part of any security guarantee framework, and we will do everything to deliver it together. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Commissioner, and I do apologize for the noise. Colleagues, I have one last speaker. Would you please be so kind to take your seats and don't speak with your colleagues, even though I understand it's nice to do it. We will have to close the debate, and I will give the floor to the Minister representing the Council to close this debate on Ukraine. Please take your seat. Please stay quiet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll try to speak loud enough for you to hear me. President, honourable members, Commissioner, thank you for this debate. Many good points have been made, and they have been repeated by many. I want to thank you, the European Parliament, for its continued steadfast support and unconditional solidarity with the Ukrainian people in their fight for peace and self-determination. Your commitment is crucial. It is crucial for Ukraine, but your commitment is also crucial for the defending of the very principle that we as Europeans stand for. In your latest resolution on Ukraine, you stress that any peaceful solution must respect the will of the Ukrainian people and not be imposed by any other international actor, and must not reward aggression or undermine Ukraine's future security. It is now vital to stay the course. We must continue to ensure strong EU support to Ukraine, including in the ongoing diplomatic process. We will pursue all our efforts to help Ukraine reach a comprehensive, just and lasting peace, while making sure that nothing on Ukraine and Europe is decided without Ukraine and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bjerre. The debate is closed and the vote will be held on Thursday. Thank you, and we will proceed with the vote.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Let's proceed With the votes before that, I will announce that the competent authorities of the Netherlands